What do you see as wisdom in your view? And what do you see as wise in today's times? Who do you see or what do you see as wise?
Oh, uh, my answer to it is kind of funny because I think a big part of my life I was all about young people know the answers and old people should step away so that we can take charge of situations. While where I am right now is that I'm starting to value older people a lot more, and I actually started as connecting wisdom to um, age or age probably because of experience. Because now I'm kind of starting to see there is a bunch of things that you can learn by reading a book or checking out some frameworks and things like that, which is how I actively worked with Make a Difference in the first few years. And you could you are excited about agile project management, you can go read a book about it and you can start practicing it and you can make it happen, right? But I think there is some things which just a lot like just life experience, not a lot of repeated experience, but just life experience can teach you.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, and 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 some and I feel that wisdom is right now where I am is that wisdom is the true understanding of something because you have experienced it in life and hence you believe in it. So I think I had knowledge of a lot of these things in the past, and I
Mm.
believed in it as blind, with blind faith in some way. Like, for example, care. As long as you come from a space of care, everything will work out. Trust can be given. These are all truths in some way, and or probably something that somebody wise once said, and I agreed to it, and I started following it. But but after living life for a while, now where I am, there are times when I've experienced how really coming from a space of care can solve something, and hence my belief in care has increased or decreased. So
Or become more nuanced, I would also say, right? Like that it's not an absolute. There are grays and
ah,
nuances. Uh,
absolutely, yeah. So
Definitely nuance.
the kind of, I think for me the faith, like the point at which I am, the earlier I used to say these things, but now there are some of these things which but if I was pushed back on it, I did not have too much leg to stand on. I was not sure. I knew it because I heard somebody else say it.
Hmm, hmm,
But
hmm.
there are some of these things now which, even if you push me back on it, it will not shake because life experiences taught me that it is true, and
Hmm,
it's
hmm.
somewhere a lot deeper. And for
It's
me,
embodied in
that
a way.
is, yeah, and that's where I am at wisdom at this point of time.
Yeah, yeah. Great. I think that opens up a few things for me, right? One is that knowledge, when embodied, seems like wisdom. In theory, it's a lot of gyan, and there is so much gyan, anyways, floating around that you could just like immerse yourself and become the most knowledgeable about something. But there's no substitute or very poor substitute for embodied learning, like what you're saying, where something that is just true as a banal platitude becomes a nuanced understanding that you can fall back on. I loved what you said. Like, if you get pushed on it, you can stand on it. And you can stand on it because you have built it for yourself almost. You converted the process of knowledge to embodiment. Otherwise, a lot of people are just repeating and parroting knowledge. But I think there is one is embodiment. But the other thing also I found interesting was this, we've spoken about this, right? The edge of learning and knowledge, at least for me, I can say, has gone beyond books and workshops. And I can say that where I am located, in the sense that there is books which have some knowledge and it's codified, but you could kind of download a book summary and get a flavor of what's being said there. Though the people who swear by a book and its logical arrangement and so on, but I'm saying where I am is like, okay, a book summary is available, a podcast is available. There's so much knowledge available, and to me, the edge of new knowledge is in dialogue. Like, one of the real edges in new knowledge is when we're actually bouncing off each other. So the knowledge is not stale. It wasn't written anywhere. It's not scripted. It's coming, we're bouncing off each other and coming into a shared understanding together. And I really feel that what we are trying to, or what at least one of the intents of Wisdom Talks, is to cultivate this fresh knowledge rather than stale knowledge. And I guess there is value to stale slash well-aged knowledge, but I think equally thrilling is, what is the edge of knowledge, right? What is the edge of knowing? And to me, these talks are that, like the edge of knowing, edge of
Yeah,
finding something together.
And there is something beautiful about uh, conversations from the angle of you cannot really prepare for it inside your head, right? Like it's just flowing real time. And I think somewhere, like I'm somebody who struggles a lot with my mind I have a monkey mind and it's always talking, and just escaping it has been one of my biggest pursuits in life. And one of the best ways to escape the monkey mind in some way for me is to engage in a deeply interesting conversation. And then what happens is that the monkey mind kind of shuts down, and I like to believe the person inside really starts speaking, and I don't even know that person. I really don't know that person,
Interesting.
and
Yeah.
that person says things which surprises me. Which
Right.
so sometimes the only way I can bring that person out is by engaging in these really interesting conversations with people, which I just can't do sitting in by myself. Also, so I think that there is that component also to the whole thing.
Absolutely. I think even when I'm in coaching sessions or sometimes facilitation sessions, I get that feeling that I'm channeling. I'm no longer talking from a local Abhishek, but like something is flowing. And there are times when Suruchi tells me that, go slow. It seems like you're just going with a flood. But then I'm feeling the energy of having tapped into something that's floating around. I don't know where it is, but suddenly it feels like I've plugged into it. And it's such an animated energy from where that comes. So I think we're like there is a geography where these new knowledge and new ideas are hanging out, and how do we plug into them? I think is and maybe this dialogue is one of the ways to plug into that fresh knowledge and harvest it to move forward. So yeah, and I think we've had so many interesting conversations over all these years. I wish we'd have recorded them and we could have seen how we've collectively grown together and progressed together. That would have been fun. Uh, but let me move directly, I think, to cut the chase to the question for today, right? Which was how to make anything happen. And now I think I know you for a while now, definitely 5+ years, I think more than 5 years now, 7, 8 years, I guess. And I've seen you evolve a lot in terms of this answer itself. And I think so this question, how to make anything happen, and uh, what has your answer to that been, and how has that evolved over time? There was a time when you thought this is how to make anything happen, and then a second phase maybe, and a third. So if you can trace your journey of how this answer has evolved, that would be interesting.
Wow, yeah, yeah. The first thing that came to my mind was I think the earliest I can remember about my relationship with making things happen was more in the lines of if somebody else can do it, I can do it was like very alive for me. Okay, if Elon Musk can do it, I can do it. If Obama can do it, I can do it. Right. And it was, and it had a little bit of a competitive edge to it. I remember when I was like 14, 15, I did not really enjoy watching. Even now, I don't watch, I don't have the culture of watching sports because, like on TV, primarily because when I was 15 or 16, the sports people were like 18, 19 years old, these international sports people. And they were probably like the first people I started like tuning into, realizing that, oh, I may not be able to do what they are doing at that age. And I was not comfortable with that at all. So,
Okay.
like, like I remember thinking about Shakira at one point of time and saying, wow, Shakira managed to do this when she was 19. I think we are the same age. And me not being very comfortable with that idea, because I strongly believe that if they could do it, I could do it. Then why didn't I not do it? You
Right,
know,
right.
and so it came from that space, and that was kind of interesting. And but then
So
I
before
probably
you change that, Jitin, before you go to the next phase, I want to also add to this phase because I have been through my version of this phase. And that was the self-help phase where there is Anthony Robbins, right? Like if you're in self-help, Anthony Robbins happens to you. And this is like old Anthony Robbins, not even the recent one. So it asks you to make a list of what do you want and like dream. So my list had a yacht and a private island and helicopters and everything, and like 5 years, 10 years, and so on. And the same, I think the same doctrine, right? Like anybody can do it kind of a doctrine. So I can totally connect to my early 20s phase. That came for me more in my early 20s. And I was on that trip, wrote a couple of books and all. And the way it got to my head also, I think was quite heady. Like I felt like, okay, I am the scene. So I can connect to that. And maybe in how to make anything happen, that's kind of a rite of passage, maybe to be at one stage at a phase where you believe that you can make anything happen. And from there onwards, and particularly I think young achievers and people who've been told like, oh, you can do anything, I think they internalize that message, and there's this crash when that discovery starts happening slowly. So yeah, so I just want to acknowledge that first phase and say that yeah, that's something that's happened with me as well. But yeah, then you can please go ahead on how that answer evolved for you then, from that anything possible, Jitin.
Anything is possible, Jitin. It did not go. It kind of went the other direction, and which is more like I kind of evolved into the way I kind of made sense of it is that I don't want to do sports, and that's the reason I'm not like whoever that is, right? Like I want to do something else, and so then it kind of evolved into like I can do whatever, like anything is more than I can do. The I kind of did start dissolving a bit, especially probably because of the mad experience. Which is more like anything is possible, and that became like a very strong narrative for me, which is like if you really put your mind to it, anything is possible was like a very strong mindset. And it was almost like it like I remember like even challenging me from the angle of like, if I really wanted to go to the moon, would you be able to do it? I'm like, yeah, I would have figured out a way to do it. And I think a big part of this mindset really came from not knowing what it really took to do anything. Because now when I'm reflecting back to what it is, as a young 19, 20, 21-year-old person, the whole world looks quite simplistic. I mean, if I really want that, I can do that, right? Like, Mahatma Gandhi believed in non-violence. I will be non-violent from tomorrow, is where I am. And I don't understand any of the complexities that is involved. So it's very easy to really believe it. And, and on a day-to-day basis, you're really testing small things, and it's kind of working out, which I was very lucky with the early stages. Whatever happened, whatever I was trying to do, it did kind of work out. Or like, so that belief system, whatever you want, like whatever, anything is possible. So it's really about putting your mind to. So then the one way it probably helped was really focusing my mind to what is it that I really want, because you have to be very careful what you wish for, because it will come true. And then it suddenly moved away from the frivolous wants, which is that like if you really can want anything, are you going to really want for something for yourself, or something that will actually make the whole world a better place? That became like a very strong component in my thought process, because I'm like, you feel very selfish if it's like you could have done anything, and what you chose to do was get yourself a BMW. Like, is that is that what you're going to do with your life? So I think there was, especially also because I think this is another big component for like where does the need to do anything come from? And for me, a big part of it was like I was definitely affected a lot by everything that was going on around me. Like even as a child, I remember how much I get affected by like children begging on the streets. Like even now, I'm in Bombay right now, and it's just like I'm not used to seeing children begging in the streets every day. Every day I get out, there are children begging in the streets. There are people living in the streets, which is all still very jarring for me, right? Like and when you are like and if it's like when you are affected by a problem, there is a very strong need to want to do something about it. And then this mindset kind of helps that, if you really want to, anything is possible. So go ahead and do it, was really the narrative. And which was probably like a good part of what the first few years of Make a Difference was, till probably about, like last 2 years has been a massive shift from that mindset, where like, I think where I am right now to some extent is more of, you can make anything happen as long as it is really meant to happen.
Wow, that's a shift. Okay. Say more about that. That sounds like a profound shift in itself. But hang on, actually, I think phase 3 that you just spoken has a lot of material there. And before going into that, I would just draw a parallel for phase 2 for me. I think one of the things that happened in phase 2 for me in how to make anything happen was just getting aware of social justice issues. And to say that how to make anything happen is not such a simple answer. It's an answer for a middle class person when I answer it. As coming from middle class, there's an opportunity set. And when, say, Mukesh Ambani had to answer how to make anything happen, he already had like his dad and Reliance. And so he's starting that question itself, he's asking from a very different place already, right? And similarly, a child who's had an adverse experience as a child. And so it's almost like different starting lines. Not that you can't cover that starting line. You could argue Elon Musk is kind of started behind, moved in. So there are cases like those. But I'm saying one thing I got aware of was that how to make anything happen also comes from where in the society are you. And so that was one. And I think this whole achievement is such a middle class story. I felt survival was the poor story, was more survive first and then achieve later kind of a story is what I thought. And for the rich it was kind of maintain my status quo kind. So that's how I imagined those stories to be. And the other thing I got in touch with for me was the price conversation, that you can have anything you want, you can make anything you want, as long as you're willing to pay the price for it. And that price could be energy, that price could be time, that price could also be sacrificing some of your closely held beliefs. Are you willing to pay for it? And there's a toll booth every on the road to success. Nobody talks about the toll booths on the road of success, where everywhere you keep paying tolls. And the people we see as highly successful today have also paid the tolls. They may not talk about those toll booths because it's not fun, glamorous to talk about toll booths, but there are toll booths. And as I think in phase two, as you start moving from that notion of everything is possible to actually making it happen, you realize that, whoa, man, there are toll booths along the pathway. And I think that was also something that came for me. And the third, I think, is also how much of this is shaped by our own experiences. So for me, I think what happened for me with the mental health issue was suddenly my attention went inwards because that's where the disaster was. And so for me, like making anything happen required first for me to come back onto my feet. Even before imagining making anything happen, like it was like, can I rebuild my inner structures which have been completely demolished by my illness? And that kind of became a pursuit, right? And I think I heard, I think this Jordan Peterson who says that, people in 20s can compare themselves because they're more or less similar, but by the time you reach 30s and 40s, each journey is so unique that all basis of comparison is lost because your life experiences have accumulated in a certain way. And I find that quite true also in some ways, that journeys actually move. It's all these ingredients. So I think, yeah, so for me, phase two looked like that. And therefore, I think my admiration for you came also from the fact of couple of things. I think your capacity to put your mind onto something, and it was not just putting your mind, but time, attention, energy, focus, intent. Like I would see the level of focus you could bring to something, and always been a fan of that, admirer of that, and the immersion with which you were able to do that. I think that was really something, and I'm sure that inspires, like it ripples out. I was seeing Make a Difference Facebook page, and I saw like 390,000 followers, and I'm like, whoa, this is all rippling from a source of you and the core team, and whatever. So I could feel that that energy, that power, and I think that is definitely one, in putting your mind to it. And the other was also, I think, being willing to put the price for it, right? Because I see, also when I see your journey, I see that through a huge phase of your life, you've really given time and energy to make a difference. Like you've really given a huge slice of yourself to building this organization. Like it's taken you. It's not like your time, it's not your energy, it's like you, right? And I think that's amazing. And to do that for yourself is like a common thing. I think what inspires me also is that you could have chosen to do it for yourself, but you chose to do it for a cause. And I think those ingredients make a huge difference to, I mean, may God give more sort of capacities to people who think like that. So yeah, so I
No,
think.
I'm fully like thank you so much for all the kind things. I'm in the stage of life where I'm struggling to receive kind things. So, but I shall acknowledge all of them. But the price is a big. You really opened up something. So I just wanted to say something about it. When you said it, is like something just came to my mind, which is that, yeah, like, so the decision that I'd made was, or more than decision, like it became clear to not just me but everybody in MAD in its early stages after the sudden growth that we experienced, that, oh wow, we can actually solve this problem in our lifetime. We can ensure that every child can grow up and have a life of dignity when they grow up. That is really possible. That became like a very, and that sense of possibility, that coming true was such an amazing experience. Like that is such an amazing possibility that we were ready to give up. We were literally ready to. We gave our soul to it. It's like we really sold our soul. I remember the thought that came to my mind when you said it was, I remember there was a point in my time where, I was getting paid pittance from MAD. I was living inside a room in the MAD office. And my entire mindset was around tomorrow, if MAD needs me to go to Bihar and live out of a small hut there, I should be able to fully, so I should, just pack a bag and I should be able to completely shift. So my
And
life.
and there was a Quora question on how much money does Jitin make? Wasn't there a
Yeah,
Quora
yeah,
question on that also? Oh, so you're like not only going through stuff, but there are people who are already willing to like, so that's
question
hard,
on
man.
that.
Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
But yeah, but I remember that it was like a constraint that, okay, fine, will everything that I own fit in that one bag, and can I leave?
Wow.
I think that's why I never had loans. I had never any of those things, and probably that has also changed, which is that it had my full being was given to MAD in that pursuit, and only because of that was it. Now when I'm kind of looking back, because I don't think I have my entire being is for MAD anymore. Like I have a family, I have a fiance, there are so much, like I have a life now, and I'm and I can feel the the change and the strain and I'm still making sense of how to do it, but that there was that price that you have to pay to reap the dividend of just
Yeah, yeah.
that belief system in your mind, really believing that anything you put your mind to is possible, has a very extreme price to pay, which at that point was great. I loved it, I enjoyed it, but now I'm kind of re-evaluating and making sense of what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think also 20s is a great time to pay the price because you have a lot of spare energy. You have nothing to lose, really. I mean, you can screw up in relationships and break up, maybe. You still have time. You can still recover. And you have oodles of energy, like endless energy. And I feel like I may sound like a traditionalist, but and also we have listeners from our 20s. I feel like 20s is the time to max that out and to pay that price and to really push the pedal on it. I think that leaves you in a good place in your 30s because now like the price of 20s is now you're running an org is already at a global level and is pushing. I think so there are dividends to be reaped of the slog of 20s is how I feel there is
Absolutely. And more importantly, like you cannot, I don't think it's a good idea. Like I have very mindfully moved away from my entire being inside MAD, primarily because I work with children, and supporting children is my job. And uh, there is only with so much authenticity after a point I can really say that I care about children and I know what children need if I don't have my own children, if I don't live my own life. Like my organization is about enabling every child to thrive, enabling every child to live the life that they are fully capable of. And in the pursuit of building that organization, if I restrict myself to just one slice, right?
So you're now starting to look at it like a whole.
Work. Like it's just that I realize, as you said, like there is some amount of reverberation that is definitely happening. I get that, and the reverberation going from me, I did not want it to be that of this kind of a savior mindset, kind of a this thing, because then like I do believe the world is fractal and all of this does affect, and so that's why living a more complete life is important for me to do this job. And in fact, like the last year, just starting to do it has opened up like my entire new level of learning and growth that I've experienced in my 30s have really come from my personal life and living a full life than just devoting to a particular cause also. So it is quite
Right,
interesting
right.
that way.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the phase we'll enter into because you already hinted it twice now. One is, when timing is the right time to make it happen, and now living whole. Just want to still also because a lot of people might be in phase two, and I'm phasing it just so that it's easy for people to think about it. Uh, just want to go into phase two ingredients because I remember one of our conversations, I think it was on a two-wheeler where I was sitting and I was asking like, what's if you had to break this down, what you were, and you were still in phase two, I think at that time, was what's that one ingredient that you would say makes all the difference? And you had said rigor. At that time, I remember you had said like it's rigor, bro. Like what I've figured is rigor is the key at that time. I don't know if it surprises you right now, but that time you said rigor is it's rigor. So I'm just curious about what do you see as ingredients when we look at phase two kind of thinking, putting your mind, achieving. What are the ingredients and how to make anything happen? Like I definitely feel, and I see you bringing in a lot of rigor in what you do that changes the quality of what you do. So I definitely felt that rigor was one of those ingredients of how to make anything happen. But if you had to go back to those times and say, what were the ingredients you had mixed into to make that happen?
Wow, like a tough question. I don't instead of trying to answer it in a framework point of view, let me just say what are the couple of thoughts that came to my mind
Sure, sure.
that really resonated with me. Which is that one is there is something in me for sure which wants me to be the best version of myself. Like
Hmm.
that is definitely very alive.
You've been
So
able to
there
tap
is
into that instinct, I would say, right? Like each of us has this, but you're tapped. Yeah.
so there is that so there is that component, but then on the other side, like, so probably because of the stage where I'm in, I look back a lot of these things in a negative light. So probably let me come from that space and see if there's which is that, like, you know Matt started out of a trauma. As a child, I've gone through enough and more, like, I would say trauma and all this stuff, but like, like life scripts, my life scripts were all I have a people pleasing life script, and a lot of those life scripts going on, which basically meant that uh, I was, like, I was kind of caught up in the drama of pleasing people, and I was caught up in the drama of wanting to be a good son, and I was caught up in the drama of, there was so many of these dramas going on that, like, really propelled me to work
Hmm.
really hard. So I would not take that away now. Like, I would love to say that it is the love for the children and all those kind of things, and I think
Hmm.
it all played a role, no doubt about it. Like, it definitely gave me the sense of direction and all that, which is great. But everybody knows that, like all those things. So probably I can give a list of the obvious ones at the end of it, but the non-obvious ones where, like, because now when I see, now sometimes when I get an escalation in the organization, I'm a lot more relaxed about it. I'm like, okay, fine. So there is a challenge, and there are these are systemic reasons why, because of which it is a challenge, and I will deal with it. There is a way to deal with it. There's no point me jumping into it at this point in time at the expense of what I'm doing right now, which is more important. Now
Hmm.
I'm able to come to a reasonable amount of conclusion there, while the old Jitin, he's so worried about pleasing people. Like, oh my god, somebody in my organization is not happy. I need to attend to them right now and fix things
Hmm.
right now.
Hmm.
That also brought in a lot of sense of urgency. Somebody in the country says something negative, thinks something negative about Make a Difference, right? I need to go right now and fix it right now.
Hmm.
So that brought in, like, so which basically means a lot of my time I was spent beating myself up. Oh, you are not good enough to do this. You are not capable of doing this. You suck. Like, there was so much of that inner discourse that was there, which the other side of which is like wanting to be a better person and believing that. So every day I woke up with, okay, fine, I need to be better because I suck.
Hmm. Hmm.
Was a
Hmm.
clear mental narrative
That
that
was
was
propelling you.
propelling me forward also. That
Right.
definitely had a role to play. And one more thing I want to put in here is that, like, but this is very stressful. All of this is like a lot of stress, and but I never look back at Mad and my experience in the first 10 years of Mad for sure as stressful. It was exhilarating, it was amazing, it was awesome. Also because I did not have the awareness that I have now that is stress. you
Ah,
know,
okay. You made it like a normal thing.
like,
Yeah,
more
yeah.
than normal. I experienced, I thought, like, now that I know what is stress, what is anxiety, right? Like, I
Hmm.
was anxious for a prolonged period of time, and the anxiety also has a less tinge of excitement in it, and I was like running in it. But and because I did not know it was anxiety, it was okay. I enjoyed it. It was great. The only problem in all of this was, or rather, ingredient, the negative ingredients is what I would put it, is that the ingredient that really helped me through that period was a lot of coping mechanisms.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
need to have very strong coping mechanisms to be highly functional with all this anxiety and stress and all this negative stuff going on. You have some kind of a coping mechanism to deal with all this. So I've struggled with smoking for a good part of my life. Like, now, after a long time, I finally quit, because now I finally started seeing, oh, when I get stressed is when I smoke. It is not like
Hmm.
a,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
while there was a time I actually associated smoking as the time when, I get to, like, find the peace and get the best ideas out.
Hmm.
So when I'm like, when I get overwhelmed in office, I'll be like, let me go have a cigarette, because that will give me the idea that I want. But now what I'm realizing is that, oh, okay, it's mostly I'm stressed out, I'm
Hmm.
anxious, my mind is acting up. I would
Right.
have gotten the idea if I had just de-stressed.
Just
But
calm down.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but I did not know to meditate. I did not know any other. So a lot of these
Get it.
coping
Yeah, yeah.
mechanisms
That's
make
interesting. Yeah. It almost seems to be like the recipe on how to make anything happen has like a couple of components. One is the above the water line. Like I'm imagining an iceberg now, and above the water line are components like having a vision, having skills, capacities, resources, and everything that's celebrated, spoken about. You can read in books, and it's the kind of nostalgia that successful people would love to highlight and talk about. And I think that creates a certain myth in a way because there's a partial truth there, is what I'm kind of discerning. And the way I'm seeing the middle of the waterline is like tapping, wanting to be the best version of yourself. So I can hear that there is that uh, which you had. But there's also below the waterline all that you're saying, right? The drama, the pleasing people, the wanting to prove yourself. And there's so much that's not spoken about. And that and the stress it creates and the coping mechanisms. And I think when we talk about success or how to make anything happen, we don't talk about below the waterline. We only keep talking about above the waterline, and then you have a lot of people wondering, saying, okay, I've got all these things going, why is this not happening for me yet? I have a vision, I have resources, why am I not so driven? And maybe you below the waterline drama hasn't kicked in yet. And I think the other thing is also with, and now I'm going to sound a little old, but with this generation, the coping mechanism, the anxiety just seems to be like anxiety and these kind of behaviors straight away head into a mental health crisis rather than like. So I'm also wondering about the quality of coping mechanism. So it's almost like I'm saying, okay, I want to be a high achiever. I have read up all the books. I'm willing to put in the hours. I'm willing to put in the cost to do that. Now I'm going to go after it. And maybe I have some internal drama to do it. But as I go on the path, stress and anxiety start coming. And now when they start coming, like you said, you had a certain coping mechanism. But I wonder whether the coping mechanisms are adequate where they are right now, because now it's amplified. Like the anxiety is amplified because showing off is amplified, and suddenly like it's not adequate. And if my coping mechanism is not adequate, I'm like screeching into a mental health crisis, and suddenly like forget being successful, I'm just like gonna survive. And like that's become the new drama, right? Like how screwed is my life? It could go that way. And you may be successful in portraying, like taking the bottom card, like you couldn't take the top place, but then you race to the bottom to take the bottom place, and you're successful in a very warped way in taking the bottom place, and I just want to call that out, saying I do see some of that happening as well.
Yeah, and probably no, when you're saying this, one thing that like one litmus test, like probably one guiding light that never failed me. Probably why the race to the bottom card has not happened yet. I like to believe that I've not compromised on the vision, the goal yet. And I've been there is like I was kind of thinking about, is there anything worth being reasonably proud of in my life? And the one thing that kind of came to me was about the fact that I've held on to the belief system that one day every child can live a life of dignity. It is possible, and I can, and I will do everything in my capacity to do that. And like there's not like, okay, you know what, it seems very difficult, let's make it smaller, let's try to do all children in South India, make it happen, right? I never compromised on that. um, and I think that has really helped me a lot, because then your compass is external. You're not your mental, because your mind can play all kinds of games and make you believe this is success or this is not success and all those kind of stuff. But just externally holding that this is what I am, that this is my life's mission, or this is what I am capable of doing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that, so probably having an external anchor to which is high enough might help. I don't know. Again,
Yeah, I think,
these are all.
yeah. No, I think there is something there again in the how to make anything recipe, because that's what this talk is about. We don't give adequate attention to the fact that we are the product of our times, and the times we are born in and the exposure that's happened. And while most people insulate themselves from the times, I think people like you or many others, and I would put myself and so many social entrepreneurs also in this category, kind of open themselves to the times and let the times hit them, let it affect them, let it bother them. Because I feel that's like the salt in the recipe, that little tinge of like the current times. I'm a product of these times, right? Uh, and I think there are larger forces that are also outside our control, right? In the sense that I would say, I would look at MAD and say that it moved to 23 cities at a very different time than now. It was a time when young people were looking for, say, something like that, maybe to do. And so there are times like I almost felt like Matt caught the moment, the pulse of the moment, And I would take it all the way even to the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs of the world who were in Silicon Valley, and they were at the right time when computers are coming in and they are at Silicon Valley. And nobody talks about that, but you had to be growing at that right age where computers are becoming programmable so that you could make Apple or Microsoft happen, and ditto with Musk, like PayPal and the money that he made from PayPal and just the timing. Right. And I think that I wanted to segue into the third phase where you started, like your recent phase, right? Where something happens when it is time for it to happen. So I'd love to hear your wisdom on that one, where you are right now vis-a-vis how to make something happen.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's time to make it happen than, if it is meant to happen.
Say more about that. Yeah.
I feel like, so it kind of came from, it came from my experience of, so man was built in this whole model of what should the world be, and now we will make it that, right? Like, so it was a active effort. Like, we will decide, it's with a lot of intention, and we sit in a circle and we decide this is what MAD will be. MAD will be a place where you will be loved unconditionally, you'll be cared for unconditionally, where trust is given, right? These are all decisions that has been almost made, in circles, like in circles with you, right? Like, this is being made, and then everybody's like, let's make it happen. And and I do know that a lot of these decisions also came from me, and I was holding a lot of these decisions. So it's like, like, everybody will be cared for was something that I held very tightly, very actively, like, and a lot of such components in MAD. And one of the experiences I had was, and I genuinely believe that that's what MAD is. Like, this is what MAD is, everything that I see at this point of time. But then I kind of stepped away from MAD for a couple of months. And then when I came back, I noticed that actually a lot of those things are not there anymore. For a lot of good reasons. I'm like, not because of anything else, but what I realized was that, I was kind of, and I remember the amount of effort, like, because I kind of stepped away from that space for a while. And when I came back into that space, I remember the amount of effort with which I was holding a lot of those cultures,
putting in a lot of effort,
which at that time was natural for me because I was in that routine. I was living in it, right? While stepping away from it, seeing things from outside, and I came back, I'm like, wow, it took so much of my effort to kind of hold all of those things. And the reason it took so much of an effort was because I was the one who was holding it. So it almost really felt like a rubber band, like rubber band, as in I did not take everybody with me. Like, there was some amount of disempowerment that probably has happened in that whole process or whatever. But like, it almost felt like there was a rubber band that held in it. And the moment I moved, like, the rubber, so it just zoomed back to the where it was. And for me, that is my learning from, like, I feel that things that is not meant to be, you can make it happen for temporarily, but with a lot of effort, and you're holding it, and it will stay there till you are there holding it. But the moment you move away from it, it kind of bounces back to what it was actually meant to be.
Absolutely. And yeah.
That for me is like, so then now where I am is to, like, try and understand what are things actually meant to be, instead of me just randomly deciding in my head what things should be and making it happen. Can I really, like, step back and, number one, be a little bit more humble about this whole experience, and just see what does MAD really, what does MAD want to be, right? Like, and like, and can, like, what is my role in all of this, right? Like, earlier I had a very clear role. I lead from the front. It is clear, right? But leading from the front has its own. This is what I feel is the negative, like, in some way. And I don't want to, like, I don't want to be I want to get to a point where if I move on, MAD continues exactly the same way and flourishes, like, like
so that's a design challenge almost. How do you design for, right? I mean, what I'm hearing is earlier design was so you-centered and driven by you that you discovered the rubber band. And now I think one of the questions we are holding, I would say, because we're working together.
I wouldn't say, I shouldn't say this for whole of MAD. Like, I'm sure other people have other thoughts about it, but like, the way I saw it when I came back was There were things that I held, which if I don't hold, it doesn't stick. So then I'm like, okay, fine, that's all. But like it might have a lot of other components also to it.
Sure. I think one thing I'm also getting in touch with vis-a-vis myself is the speed of mind and speed of life, where I see that the speed of my mind is like really over speeded and wants to have so much happen and it's filled with ideas and is buzzing. And then there's a speed of life that goes at its own pace. And sometimes it explodes at faster than mind also. Like you never know what's gonna explode. Like you don't know how something goes viral, for example. But there's something like a speed of life which is very hard to fully calibrate. But I think to me, it's a very humbling thought that the speed of my mind has almost no correlation with speed of life, and that the speed of mind has to adjust with the speed of life rather than the other way. As much as you
Yeah,
struggle with reality, and for me, the way it manifests is like in a manic episode. The bipolar manic episode is classic. Speed of mind has gone so fast that it's lost touch with reality. Like forget speed of life, it's lost touch with life, right? And what I'm learning in coping with my condition is also to train the mind to honor speed of life.
yeah,
And I'm realizing that is also quite a discipline. Um, Also, the other thing that came to me was some work by Werner Erhard, where he says that nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. uh, and then he goes into exploring what does it take to make an idea's time come. And this is like he's a very nice document called the source document of the World Hunger Project. So they were trying to eradicate hunger from the planet, and in 70s they've written this source document, and it uses a lot of the landmark forum est kind of language, ontological leadership, and so on. And I think what I find interesting there is this whole statement where he says that when the time for an idea to happen comes, nobody can stop it, because it's just like the time has the zeitgeist is making it happen, and it's not one person and nobody can resist it, and these larger forces. And I think what I'm holding is how do we tune our capacity to kind of like a skilled sailor is able to sail with the winds, is able to move the sails in a way that he doesn't need fossil fuel. He's wind driven, but he's able to move the sails so that there is cruising, and I think one of the question, it's a abstract question, but I think there is something there. How do I sense the winds and tune in my sails? And your wind may be very different from my wind because it's what's happening in my life, for example, and maybe I need to shift the sails a bit. If I don't do that, my health may crash. Or so I think a lot of us, one metaphor I find useful is we're all sailors. And how do we sail in a way, or dancers, how do we dance with life? And there's something there as well, because then the effort is lesser. You're going with the wind as much as possible. You're not fighting the wind. uh, and I think that seems like a more zen like way of making something happen.
yeah. No, I get I think this is where I don't have any wisdom on this because I have no experience doing any of these things. There has been like, in the past, I've definitely been in the state of flow where things are happening and things like that. But and now I know the level of awareness that I have right now. I know that I have a long way to go before I can like. I think the 30s is really the 20s. Anything was possible for me because I had no idea um, how much time, what went into making anything happen. So with that blind optimism, I jumped in, and you end up doing things because you're whatever, right? And you're pretty happy with whatever happens, and you're moving on from one thing to next thing. So it's like you don't realize that you don't really do exactly what you thought and stuff like that. It's like a treadmill. But my 30s, I believe anything is possible because I can see what it takes to make things happen, and I know that with enough amount of time and work, if I practice and if I put into it, it will happen. And
Hmm.
where that kind of connects to this conversation is that, like, I do agree that like that finding the wind in the sails at some point, it is about like the like, if you are able to calm your monkey mind, if you're able to kind of listen to your inner voice, it's very easy to know which way to go and what to do. Action is very clear. Like you always know what the right answer is. And Gita tells us so much about it. So it's like it's almost like the knowledge is already there. Like you need to act from a space of not thinking about the end outcome, but thinking more from what acting more from this thing, not coming from a space of likes and dislikes, but I'm acting from inside. All of this I get it, but I have very strong likes and dislikes at this point of time in my life.
Sure. I think being true to yourself is key. But what's the answer now to what it takes? Like you said, what it takes to make anything happen. So what's your 30s Jitin answer to what it takes? Like if you had to do 3 things or 5 things, what does it take? What it takes?
Okay, I think there are two sides to it, which is I think there is an inner side to it and there is an outer side to it. Uh, the inner side to it would be that um, I think it's all contextual also, which is that what do you want to do in life, because if you and yeah, I guess there is no real escaping it, no matter what you're trying to do, because at the end of the day, uh, if you I think what it definitely takes is whatever you're doing in life, it will all pose challenges, and when it poses these challenges, you get into this whole space of self-doubt and anger and coping mechanisms and traumas, and all of these things will come up. I really feel like the 30s, all the stuff that you have not dealt with will
Come
will
back to
present
you.
will come back home to roost, kind of a thing. But and 30s is your time to fix it, because if you do not fix it, then 40s, 50s, and 60s, I feel, is going to be like a lot more painful and bad, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The big because you'll get stuck in the cycle. I think 30s is when the cycle, you either escape the cycle or you get stuck in the cycle for the rest of your life, is how I am experiencing my 30s. I don't know whether it's a universal thing at all. So really
Mm-hmm.
putting that time to really get over all your, for me, I know the things that I need to get over are, I have built a lot of I have a lot of, I wouldn't say traumas, but my childhood experience have definitely made me more sensitive to a bunch of things, and which is not allowing me to experience the world in the same way. I have to get
Mm-hmm.
past that.
Getting past a lot of that is needed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying there's an inner and an outer, and what I'm hearing is inner, you have to get past some of this stuff. Yeah.
Correct,
And
correct.
the outer is.
Outer, the outer, uh, like my understanding now, again, the outer is getting a deeper appreciation of how much. So now where I am when I'm trying to do something is, like, earlier I dreamt big, and I'm like, I'm going to jump into it and I'm going to do it. And now when I'm dreaming big, I'm trying to build the ability of, okay, fine, this is a big dream. For this to happen, it's going to take me, with my experience of the last 20 years, it's going to take me 30 years to 50 years to make this really happen. If it's going to
Mm-hmm.
take 30 years to 50 years, because that's what, like, anything that is worthwhile of doing really
Mm-hmm.
is normally takes 30 to 50 years, is where I am, right? Like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
30 to 50 years, then being able to building the skills to really break it down. Okay, fine. So then what needs to happen in the next 10 years, 10 years, 10 years?
Right.
Roadmapping it back, and from a 10 years to 5 years, and from 5 years to
Right.
a 3 year, 3 years to a
Bringing
one
it
year,
back.
1 year to a month, and say, okay, fine. So this is the action I can take today, and this is the output I should be excited about in the next quarter, which should make me genuinely happy. Because the old Jitin will only be genuinely happy if the final outcome came true, and that's gone. Like, that day
Sure.
is gone.
Sure. Sure.
So that is what I'm trying to
The
cultivate.
outer, nice, lovely, lovely. So the outer is this vision combined with a very practical, immediate step towards that vision and celebrating that win, not waiting for that catharsis only at the end. I think, and I relate to what you say, Jitin, because we talk about Gandhi, we talk even about the current government that is there. These have roots which are like 80, 100 years is what it takes, right? Like even freedom struggle also. I mean, there are so many forces, firstly, that need to come together for India's independence. And even if we zoom into Gandhi, we see like he's doing one huge campaign every 10 years or 5 years, not like next year, next year, next year. And I think the long periods in jail, long periods of introspection, and did too, I think, with the roots of RSS and then BJP and then forming a government. Like there's a long road. And I think deep change and deep social change for sure needs a long road. And also I feel that corporations and governments cannot think those time horizons simply
Yeah.
because I feel like corporations have a quarterly profit to deliver or governments have a 5 year mandate. UN has a 15-year mandate, like SDGs. So now UN is thinking till 2030. They're not going to think till 2060 or 2090 or. And I think I do feel that the not-for-profit sector and the individuals have the capacity to dream for future generations beyond their own self-centered mandates. And I love what you're saying about 30 to 50 year directions. And I would also say that if we can't do that for ourselves, we find somebody who's thinking 30 to 50 years and align ourselves. Just trusting that here is somebody who's got a 30 to 50-year vision, and let's back that up, because that's still more likely to happen than, it's still worth a shot. I think that's where I would kind of pitch that in, and therefore I would definitely insert an advertisement for Make a Difference for sure, to connect to it, to support it, to engage with that, and ditto with Blue Ribbon. And we're doing a Youth Fest 2069, again, long dreams, 50 plus years dreams. Just one last question, Jitin, before we close, was around this doctrine of productivity. I mean, it's a productivity obsessed culture also, but also productivity helps, right? And I've seen you having a lot more resources than, say, the average person. That's how I see you, saying in terms of energy, in terms of capacities, and also in terms of your roots, your family, and what you inherit as your constitution, your capacities to think, and so on. So how do you look at productivity? Do you see it as something that's person to person? Do you see it as a worthwhile pursuit as a doctrine? Uh, yeah, I mean, what is your sense on productivity? What are hacks? How have you looked at productivity?
I don't think individual productivity matters anymore, because because the truth is that there's nothing an individual can really do after a point. Like, how much can I do in that? Like there is only so much. So productivity from an impact point of view, I don't really see that as like a critical component, right? Like more from because an individual being the most productive individual can also really do really nothing
so
much.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? But a group of if that person is on top of an entire ecosystem, an entire this thing, and that entire ecosystem is productive, which is like in some way in integrity, right? Like I would give productivity as like, in integrity, then, suddenly that is the difference between making things happen and not making things
happen. Nice. Wow. Okay. The difference between being alone and being a part of an ecosystem which is in integrity.
Which is in integrity, which is productive, and then suddenly, like, productivity. Currently, I am actively trying to. I'm always trying to be productive. So there is no, there's no dearth of that. But like my current trip of, there was a time when I was productive because I thought that if I work harder, the whole world will become a better place. But like now, where I am is that like, okay, I have only so much time for this, and if I need to live a full life, what is the most I can do in that time period, right? And there is so much that you have to do, even as a citizen. Like, it's important for you to be productive, because if you're not productive, if you're wasting your time, then you don't have time to actually engage with the community. You don't have time to know what is happening in the larger country. You don't have time to talk to your your cousins who actually need your advice at times. You don't have, like, as an individual, we actually do have a lot of things to do. It may not be too much, like, I really feel it's not too much. It is just that, like, most of us have not really figured out how to, like, be productive enough to do our bare minimum responsibilities. And if we do our bare minimum responsibilities to all the stakeholders in our lives, right, the world will be a better place, genuinely. So I would still push for each of us to be productive at a personal level, so that we can live a holistic life, than productivity for the sake of productivity, which doesn't really change anything.
Yeah, there is a limit. I mean, how much can an individual impact? So no, I hear you. I hear both parts of your answer. The first part where you said that plugged into an ecosystem is when you can really make impact happen. And the second, productivity, just as living a whole life. Where I'm located, though, I also find that being a normal adult is really hard work. As far as where I'm located, I'm somebody who has a family, has children, has parents, has siblings, has friends, has the whole work, and plus doing civic, and plus earning your livelihood, plus taking care of your health, inner practice, meditation. Like, it's a whole plate, a really whole plate. So I think, to me also, just being instead of asking only how to make anything happen, I think just even how to make your own life happen, and happen well, and happen in integrity, is a gift to the world, because that piece of the world going right contributes to the whole world going right. And I think just being able to see that my piece, if I get my piece right, how it ripples into the world, and into and I think there's something there also. So that was one thing that got evoked. And yeah, and I think just one more, the other one that got evoked was around intergenerationality, and the fact that we're talking 20s, we're talking 30s, and and we have some of our friends here. So we have young friends like Pankti, who's helping us bring this together, and is at 20s, and we have Kiran, who's 50s, and we're blessed to have friends across generations. Yes, hello to both of them, and to so many others. There's Doc, and there is Vaish,
Shweta
and
Char is here. I'm very
yeah. So
happy to
lots
see.
of good friends here, and I think just the joy of catalyzing wisdom through and with friends. And these are all very dear friends with whom at different stages we've bonded. And I think just want to acknowledge that wisdom also flows from friends and from intergenerationality. I think so many problems can just be averted by being able to have access to a 20s to 60s lens simultaneously. So one is the 30s lenses that we are wearing, but then it's such a joy to have access to those lenses because you just cannot see. I know I cannot see as a 20-year-old sees anymore, or as a teenager, my daughter sees anymore. And I think just there's something there in even making anything happen. There is a value to an intergenerational lens, because that's when you're really digging deep into your roots. Because somebody who's 60 has seen a past, which is a pre-BJP, pre-Congress emergency era past, maybe, and they come from that experience. To somebody who's seen possibilities as a 20-year-old, which which whatever you do, that edge kind of goes to the new generation, which is with it, and I think there's something there. So yeah, so I think we've covered a large span. I'm going to come back to you for your final, for what this evokes and for some final
Yeah,
thoughts as well.
this needs such a. I know we are kind of running out of time, but
No, we can go on. I mean, it's fine. People can also leave, and we can
I've
slice
not
and dice
spoken to
this.
anybody about this, which is
Yes.
that like again, like so much has changed in my mind because there used to be a time when I thought we had nothing. Like the first campaign in Make a Difference when we started Mad was the adults have screwed up. It's up to us now. That all the problems in the world that exist were because of these adults, and like we have nothing to learn from them. They what they have done to the world is an absolute. It's up to us, and we need to like burn everything and start from scratch. And Mad, there was basically the thought process from which I started Mad, and like but now like when I'm seeing the world around me, like I'm just so there's so many dimensions to it. Like it is such a critical. If intergenerational knowledge transfer does not happen, like life, like life will stop happening. Because like if you really think about it, the best, like every generation has, like like it's a DNA. If you think about it from our DNA is intergenerational. Like like there is something, there's so much learned. So that is very natural. Like this whole idea of life, like one of the very natural things is things being the best things from one generation being handed over to the next generation. And the being in a culture which has got like where things have been handed over to you for the last 3,000, 4,000 years, right? It has so much more depth than a culture where it is just like it started like it's fresh, like nobody knows anything. And you can feel that difference. Like you can really feel the difference when you travel and things like that. And as young people, I'm like, oh, I'm so scared now, because if I have left, like if I think that I'm going to start this from scratch, the level of sophistication it can have is nothing compared to
Right.
sophistication thousands of years that is possible. So now I'm a lot more aware of like, oh, I want to kind of bring that like build on top of it, stand on the shoulders of giants, and be like, do not, like, a lot of shit was not good for sure, but there is so much goodness which is even beyond comprehension. And probably religion is one part of it, spirituality is another part of it. These things you cannot figure out in your lifetime. So that I'm a big fan of at this point of time. And yeah, I have one more component, but I would rather, I think.
But yeah, no, so I think we can extend a bit and people are free to leave because we are on a very interesting thread. I think it's an important thread because, when I look at our ancients, it's like 2000 years ago or 2500 years ago. If somebody says, okay, send a time capsule that lasts 2500 years and informs people into the future and helps them make better decisions. I don't know how it has happened, but I mean, you quoted the Gita and we talk about Mahabharata and the epics, and this is like wisdom that is packaged in such a powerful, symbolic way that it hits us, and it's so relevant even today, right? And I think there is so much there to unpack, and we are all, I think, and this I'm sounding a little indic now, but I'm willing to sound that, saying that as children of this culture, we have so much to unpack, and as children of humanity also, I think when I look at like Rumi and Kabir and all of that. I just feel like we are spoiled children of humanity who, for the first time after a while, have access to all wisdom traditions. Like, you don't have to only be restricted to your own narrow wisdom tradition and your kul devta or anything. You're spoiled for choice. Like, you can rob the wisdom store of humanity and apply it in
Yeah.
your life. But I think we're quite blessed that way.
The honest truth is like the education system that we've been brought up has really screwed us over. Where we like when I studied, I have read Bible when I was young. I was taught Bible because I would go to Sunday class every Sunday. But the depth of the wisdom was never taught. It was taught in such a bad manner that I really, by the time I was 18 or 19, I was like, you know what? Okay, it's a bunch of bullshit to control people. Was literally how I thought it was, right? And to imagine that, so the world has done such a bad job, especially in the last 100 years. Once the education as we know it, which is, so if you really think about, like, before that, there was a respect, there was some amount of mentor transmitting their knowledge to the mentee, that whole process. And we tried, as humanity, we tried a different system, which is that we'll write it all down in a piece of book, and then we will kind of try to transmit it. But it's been like it is, so I feel like it is one of the biggest dangers of our generation, which is that if we end up going to the next generation as people are like, okay, Gita, this is all a bunch of bullshit, there's nothing much in it, and we're screwed. Like, we're screwed
We've
as a
lost
generation.
a valuable link in that.
And but I want to just bring it to a little bit on a personal level also, which is that, like, I feel that I don't know why, is it because of the amount of change that we have experienced in the last 10, 20, 30 years, that, like, so right now I'm seriously thinking about, about marriage and starting a married life. And I want so many advices about, like, from my mom and my dad about this. And while for and I'm so grateful that I can ask them about this, because they have experience doing this for 30 years, and they have, a lot of things have worked out, a lot of things are not worked out, but they have things to say which works. And now the problem here is that in my 20s, I couldn't take it from my parents. I couldn't get any relationship advice from my parents, simply because their moral or ethical standards were so different from mine that any conversation about it was not possible, right? And which led me to, like, make a lot of dumb relationship decisions in my 20s. Which, we are suffering for not having those mentors in our life, not
Yeah,
having those people in our lives on one side. And somewhere, and in that whole process, I think that we ended up believing that our parents have nothing to offer us because they're too. And that, now I'm really trying to rediscover what our own parents have to offer us. Do we, like, forget the ancients, forget Gita?
Yeah, what
Because
to say at home? Yeah.
your parents are one of those integral lines of transfer of knowledge that
Right.
exists. And how much of that are you able to preserve and take
Have you
forward?
tapped into that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I resonate with that. So I want to do two things. I want to take one step back to when we were talking about religion. And one part that we miss in how to make anything happen is the role of faith, right? And the role of prayer and the role of really believing in something. Because I feel that with rationality and modern postmodernism, you kind of thrown the baby out of the bathwater. And just this whole conviction, faith, belief in something beyond yourself, as codified by religion, is a very healthy aspect of religion. And I think in making anything happen, there is a capacity to in religion to actually enable it. Right now, that capacity can be unhealthy, like as people who crashed 9/11, when they crashed the planes into the World Trade Center. Of course, it was bad, but you have to see that it was a highly complex task done with very limited resources. And there is something that drove people, some conviction, some ideas, some faith, some belief. That's like the power of faith channeled. And what does that look like when channeled for the better? And for whatever it's worth. And I do feel that one of the less spoken about ingredients in how to make anything happen, I feel, is like prayer, or like Gandhi would speak about the power of prayer, but I think you made prayer and all that very uncool. And I do feel that it's time to bring back the coolness of, praying 5 times a day, or being able to go to the church every Sunday, or having a temple nearby where you can just go and unwind, man. Like, why does it always have to be the pub or the cafe coffee day? Can you just hang out at the temple for an hour and feel the same peace? So I just feel like one of the things you need to do is to culturally, for a lot of people, make religion cool, not just and that was one part, and the other totally resonate, in how do you tap into the lines of wisdom that are back home and that are cultural wisdom, and it's hard work to engage and dialogue with your folks. We've all struggled with it. In fact, I think it's a rite of passage to individuate and then come back to your parents and meet them again and then absorb their wisdom, kindness, goodness, and so on. And in India, I think family as a structure is such an enabler. Like if you ask me how to make anything happen, then you look at, okay, what are the top people who made anything happen? And you say Ratan Tata, Anand Mahindra, Mukesh Ambani, and you're like, what was common in all of them? And we say family. Because they all had family that got them there. We don't see it that way. We love to read their biographies and how did they make it happen. We don't see that. So I totally that really rings true when we talk about intergenerationality and wisdom.